What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Who Wants to Brawl YouTube channel. That is not a question, that is a statement. My name is Who, and I'm letting you know I want to brawl. Here, we're all about the Magic format brawl, specifically in regards to Magic Arena, so we don't have to worry about budget, we only have to worry about wildcards.
This episode is a new deck tech. On these episodes, I go over a new Brawl commander and walk you through my ideas and strategies of how best to build this commander. Today's commander is going to be Galazeth Prismari. It is 2, a blue and a red for a 3/4 Elder Dragon. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, we create a treasure token. And it says artifacts we control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. So with this deck, we're going to want to have a lot of low casting cost artifacts to ramp into large spells that help us take over the game. As a blue-red player, it is my dream to cast as many large spells that draw as many cards and deal as much damage as I can with one spell, so hopefully this deck fulfills all of my dreams. It seems like a pretty straightforward strategy, so let's see how we can make it work. Our first category is going to be low-to-the-ground artifacts. These are artifacts that come out quickly, do their thing, and then allow us to tap for more mana for our larger spells later in the game when we finally cast Galazeth. First up, we have a couple 1-mana artifacts in Scalding Cauldron, Shadowspear, and Witching Well. The Cauldron can sack to deal 3 damage to target creature. It's always nice when our mana rocks with Galazeth double as removal. And then Shadowspear is one of the better equipment in Brawl right now that gives a creature +1/+1, trample, and lifelink. Don't underestimate the for 1 mana permanents our opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible. Right now, with the gods and particularly Toski, there are a decent amount of indestructible creatures running around, so we can get a lot of use out of that. And then Witching Well comes down and scries 2 for us, but we can cash it in later in the game for 2 cards. Goldvein Pick has a claim for one of the best cards in this deck. It's an equipment for 2 mana that gives a creature +1/+1 when it's equipped. It can equip for only 1 mana, but most importantly for this deck, when the equipped creature deals combat damage, we get a treasure token. Galazeth has flying, which means it's not blocked very often, and the fact that we can use that treasure token as a mana rock means we get way more mileage out of Goldvein Pick than you would think. And then we have a pair of 2-mana artifacts that enter the battlefield and draw a card in Golden Egg and Sleeper Dart. Sleeper Dart also has the upside of tapping and sacking it to lock a creature down for a turn, while Golden Egg for 2 mana, tapping it and sacking it, we can gain 3 life. We only ever want to activate these abilities in an absolute pinch when we would lose if we don't. Otherwise, we usually want to keep these on the battlefield. And then Tome of Legends is an excellent card draw card in this deck. It enters the battlefield with a page counter, and whenever we play our commander or attack with it, we put a page counter on it, and then for 1 mana, tapping it and removing a page counter, we can draw a card. With this deck, hopefully we'll have a lot of artifacts on the battlefield that we can use as mana to cast our spells, leaving mana open for this so we can continuously draw cards every turn. And then Icebind Pillar is one of the most underused cards in all of Brawl, at least in my opinion. It's a 3-mana snow artifact that for a snow mana, it can tap an artifact or creature. It's essentially a better Icy Manipulator in this deck, and Icy Manipulator is still a great card once it's on the battlefield. I will stand by that. So usually our opponent will have one big nasty threat that we don't want attacking, and this can tap that down when we need it to. Our next strategy is removal. Any Brawl deck needs it, but with this deck, it's actually easier to cast because Galazeth creates a ton of mana later in the game, so let's see how we can use that. Frostbite is a 1-mana removal spell that if we have 3 or more snow permanents, it deals 3 damage instead of 2. Demon Bolt we can foretell for 2 mana early and then cast it for 1 mana later, or just 3 mana straight up if we need to. Having these 1-mana removal cards is excellent with Galazeth because we can play Galazeth on turn 4 and still have mana up with its enters the battlefield ability to be able to cast these. And then Thundering Rebuke is just an efficient 2-mana deal 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker. Soul Sear is a 3-mana deal 5 damage to a creature or planeswalker, but we make that creature lose indestructible. I discussed it with Shadowspear. Don't underestimate making a creature lose indestructible. And then Heated Debate is a 3-mana deal 4 damage spell that can't be countered. Don't underestimate that can't be countered as well. There's a lot of counter spells running around Brawl right now. And hey, would you look at that? Speaking of counter spells, we have Saw It Coming, which is a 3-mana instant that counters a spell, but we can foretell it for 2 earlier in the game and then cast it for 2 later in the game. With Galazeth out, we usually want to pay the foretell because we can use our artifacts later in the game to pay for its mana cost and still use our lands in the way that it's normally intended for. And then Cinderclasm is a 2-mana instant that deals 1 damage to each creature, but we can kick it for a red, and if we kick it, it deals 2 damage to each creature. This is in there specifically for Scute Swarm. I don't know how many people have played against the Scute Swarm. I'm assuming most people watching this video, but you know that 1 or 2 lands and that gets out of quick in a hurry, and you need as many things that can eliminate as many Scute Swarms as possible. This one will take all of them out, assuming they don't mutate. And then we have Draconic Intervention, which, as an additional cost to cast it, we can exile an instant or sorcery from our graveyard and then deal damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to each non-dragon creature. This does not remove Galazeth. An A+ card for me. And then we have Storm's Wrath, which is just simply a 4-mana, deal 4 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. One of my favorite cards, one of my pet cards in the format. I love it. I'm a red player. I love red removal. It's fine. For utility pieces with Galazeth, they pretty much consist of anything that's not a cheap artifact, removal, or a large spell. All of these are pretty vital to making the deck work, though. First up, we're going to talk about some card draw with Archmage Emeritus, something along those lines. It's a 4-mana 2/2 that whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, we draw a card. We're going to be casting a lot of those with this deck, hopefully, so hopefully we get a lot of cards out of this. And then Behold the Multiverse is a 4-mana instant that we can foretell for 2, and then scry 2, draw 2. Pretty self-explanatory. And then Graven Lore is a 5-mana instant that we can scry X, where X is the amount of snow mana we put into it, and then draw 3 cards. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Multiple Choice is one of my favorite cards from Strixhaven, as well as one of the best flavor cards Magic has ever come up with. Little side note. But it's 1 blue and X. If X is 1, scry 1 and draw a card. If X is 2, choose a player. They bounce a creature they control, or return a creature they control to their owner's hand. If X is 3, we create a 4/4 red and blue elemental creature token. And if X is 4 or more, we do all of the above. They literally gave us a multiple choice card where D is all of the above. I love it. And then Winged Words is a 3-mana sorcery that we draw 2 cards, but it costs 1 less if we control a creature with flying, which our commander so happens to do. One of the biggest problems with this deck is running out of cards, so all of these cards here are vital to making sure the deck runs smoothly. And then we're going to need some ramp, so we have format staple Arcane Signet, a 2-mana rock that taps to add 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. Just a great card. We have Storm-Kiln Artist, which is a 4-mana 2/2 that gets +1/+0 for each artifact we control, which in this deck, hopefully we're controlling a lot. And on top of that, it also creates a treasure token whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery with its Magecraft ability. And then Solemn Simulacrum is also a staple format. It's a 4-mana artifact creature. It enters the battlefield. We search our library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle, and then when it dies, we draw a card. Everything we need out of a utility piece, it ramps, it draws cards, it's perfect. It's also an artifact in this deck, which adds mana while it's on the board. And then Goldspan Dragon is arguably one of the best creatures in Brawl as a 5-mana 4/4 flying haste that when it attacks, we create a treasure token. But our treasures have tap sacrifice this artifact and add 2 mana of any color instead of 1. So it gives us that artifact for Galazeth, and in a pinch, it helps us ramp even more. And then Experimental Overload can be absolutely vital to this deck. When we cast it, we create an XX, where X is the number of instants or sorceries in our graveyard. Hopefully that's going to be a decent amount. And then most importantly, we return an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand. This can help get back one of our removal or card draw cards that we've already talked about, or arguably more importantly, help get back one of our finishers, which leads us into our next topic, big spells. These are just large spells that help us end the game or give us such an advantage that our opponent can't come back from. Every blue-red player's dream. Our first large spells are a couple of double modal face cards. These are the mythic modal double face cards, so they can enter the battlefield as a land, untapped if we pay 3 life, or they enter tapped, and they tap to add 1 mana of their color. In Seagate Restoration, we have a 7 mana sorcery that we draw cards equal to the number of cards in our hand plus 1, and then we have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. And then in Shatterskull Smashing, we have X red red, and then it deals X damage divided as we choose among up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. And if X is 6 or more, it deals twice X damage to those creatures instead. Both sides of these are extremely useful, and with Galazeth out, we can ramp out to these pretty quickly. Alrund's Epiphany is a 7 mana extra turn spell that we also create 2 1/1 blue bird creature tokens, and then we can foretell it for 2 and cast it for 6 later in the game. With Galazeth, honestly with this, we often want to cast it for 7, because early in the game we want to be using that mana for our artifacts. And Sublime Epiphany is one of the most efficient cards in Brawl right now. It's a 6 mana spell that we can choose any number of these. We can counter a spell, counter an activated or triggered ability, bounce a non-land permanent, create a token that's a copy of a creature we control, and draw a card. If we create a token of Galazeth, we can sacrifice the real Galazeth to create a copy of Galazeth and get that ETB effect, kind of resetting the situation. And then Creative Outburst is just a nice 7 mana instant. It deals 5 damage to any target. Then we can look at the top 5 cards of our library and put one of them in our hand and the rest on bottom of our library. Removal with a card draw on it is always good, especially in a deck that can ramp. And speaking of ramp, we can pay 2 mana and discarding it to create a treasure token. We don't often want to do that, but it's nice to have the option. And we also have that option with Magma Opus, but we also have the option to pay 8 mana to do 4 damage divided as we choose, tap 2 permanents, and create a 4/4 red elemental creature token, and then draw 2 cards as well. This is the perfect card to control the board before our next turn, when hopefully we're able to finish our opponent off. Inescapable Blaze is just a nice 6 mana instant that can't be countered and deals 6 damage to any target. And then Crackle with Power is probably the card that finishes the most games off in this deck. For XXX red red, it deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X different targets. It is not unheard of in this deck to have Crackle with Power deal 4 times 5, so 20, or even up to 25 damage. It does it pretty often, and at that point, it's just game over. And then finally, we have our lands. First up, we have some lands that enter the battlefield tapped in Volatile Fjord, Swiftwater Cliffs, and Temple of Epiphany. And then we have Evolving Wilds, which taps and sacks to search our library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. These are all some nice mana fixers, especially Temple of Epiphany, which can scry 1 when it enters the battlefield. And then Fabled Passage can do the same, except we untap that land if we control 4 or more lands. Frostboil Snarl enters the battlefield tapped unless we reveal a mountain or island from our hand, and it taps to add a blue or red. Command Tower in this deck adds a blue or red and enters the battlefield untapped. Great card. And then Riverglide Pathway can add a blue. It's also a double modal face card, which on the back is Lava Glide Pathway and taps to add a red. And then we finish it off with 7 snow-covered islands and 8 snow-covered mountains. Now let's talk about what I got wrong on the first go-around. Nothing. So that does it for Galazeth Prismari. What did you think of this deck? Do you want to give it a shot? If so, what changes would you make? I personally found this deck to be one of the more enjoyable decks I've built to play, so I highly recommend that everyone watching this video give it a shot, and if you do, let me know, and let me know what changes you make. I'm dying to hear what you say. Also, do you think this deck lives up to the Prismari name of casting ridiculously large and creative spells? And is Galazeth worthy of representing that idea? And that does it for this video. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, share with a friend to help the channel grow, hit that bell icon to make sure you get notifications about new videos to make sure you don't miss anything. I also want to give a shout out to my buddy Rob Slota for making the Who Wants To Brawl logo. He's a tattoo artist, and you can check out his Instagram by following the link in the show notes below. You can email me at whowantstobrawl@gmail.com. My Twitter is @brawlwho. I also stream on Magic Arena at twitch.tv/whowantstobrawl. Check me out on Sundays at 11 in the morning, where I stream last week or next week's deck tech. On Mondays, I stream random decks. Sometimes I do Brawl, sometimes I'll even throw in a draft. I also stream a random day of the week, or at least I try to. This is Random Games. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll let you know when I'm going to play ahead of time and what I'm going to play ahead of time. But for now, this is Who letting you know I no longer want to brawl. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.